All right, guys, welcome back. Now, if you're new here and you clicked on this video, then maybe you were wanting to learn about what an LX Dodge is, the Chargers, Magnums, 300s, specifically the 06 to 10 model years. So first of all, thanks for clicking on the video, and hopefully you guys learned something. And if you're looking to buy one of these cars, maybe it'll clear some things up for you, what to look for, so you don't have any surprises. So let's get started. So the LX Dodge chassis is the 05 to 10 model year cars. Basically, it's your Magnum and 300, which started in 2005, and then the Charger in 2006. The LX chassis ran till 2010. Now the Challenger came in 2008, and that was the chassis code LC. Then starting in 2011, as far as the four doors go, the Magnum was discontinued, the 300 and Charger continued under the LD chassis, and that is the current chassis today, up till now. In 2011, there's very few things that changed. Majorly, it was the body, obviously. And then small things like small adjustments in the suspension and the cradles, the subframes, a little slightly different. Overall, 06 or 05 to current, the chassis are basically the same. Even the Challengers. They're just 4 inches shorter. Now, I've owned personally 3 06 to 10 Chargers and 2 11 to 14s. So we'll go over specific Charger models first, but the info after that about issues and stuff like that will cover all LX Dodge cars. So the Challenger, the Charger, Magnum, and 300s. All right, Charger models. So the first model is the base model. The early base models came with the 2.7 V6 and a 4-speed transmission, believe it or not. As far as those cars go, I would probably avoid them. The only reason I would probably pick one of those up is if it was clean and I had a swap to do. And after that, you got the SXT. Those came with the better 3.5 V6. And then, of course, you got the RTs. Base RT is basically an SXT, but it had the 5.7 in it. So then going from there, you have the Road and Track Pack RT, and you got stiffer suspension, and they say a little bit more power increase due to low restrictive intake and exhaust. And then you got the sport seats, the better steering rack, the 9-land steering rack, which SRT8s also had. And then that's basically the same thing as what a Daytona is, except the Daytona's got the stripe packs and the black wing and the grille, but the Road and Tracks and Daytonas are basically the same cars. Obviously, the Daytonas are more rare because they're numbered, so that's something to take in consideration also. Now, the way you can tell the difference between a base RT and a RT with Road and Track Pack is just from the outside. The Road and Track Pack cars have the Heritage red RT emblems in the front and rear, whereas the base RT has just basic chrome RT badge on the back. But that's how you tell the difference from the outside. Obviously, inside, you have the performance seats with red stitching. That gives it away right there. Then you got the big guy, the SRT8 with the 6.1 Hemi. Obviously, that's the car that you would want if you're looking for a performance car out of the LX Dodges. And then that car also came in a limited model, the Super B, which had the stripe pack, but it was numbered. But it's basically the same thing as an SRT8. It's just higher trim, I guess. Now the SRT cars got the Brembos all around, the Bilstein shocks, which is a good upgrade, slightly lower stance than the RTs and Daytonas, and then of course the 6.1 it's a fantastic engine. Now going back to the RTs, there's the 06 to 8 pre-Eagle engines, and then 09 to 10 had, or I guess 09 and up, had the Eagle engine. The pre-Eagles were rated around 350 horse. The Eagles, 375. Now the Eagles had better heads, better intake manifold, and VVT. That's where they got the extra power. So obviously, if you're shopping for one of these cars, whether it be a Charger, Magnum, or 300, and you want the 5.7, the Eagle engine is the way to go. But if you could afford it, the SRT cars with the 6.1 would be top tier. Now, no way am I dissing on the pre-Eagle 5.7s. They're plenty capable. I'm just saying, if you're looking to make power, you might as well start with the best package you can get. If that happens to be the pre-Eagle 5.7, a head swap and a cam will put you way past that 375 mark of the Eagle. So I mean, plenty of potential with the pre-Eagle 5.7. I own a pre-Eagle 5.7 in my 08. It just happened to be the right deal. I was shopping for an 09 or 10, but you know, I just couldn't pass this car up. So don't think I'm hating on the pre-Eagle stuff, because plenty of guys make good power with those engines too. So then, like I said, the Daytonas and Super Bs were numbered and they had the stripe packs on the cars, but all cars other than the 2.7 cars got the NAG1 transmission. All the diffs were open diffs, even though there's different ratios. Then you also had the option in 2007 to get all-wheel drive in the 3.5 or the V8 cars. Then of course you got police package cars, the fleet cars. Those also came all-wheel drive or rear-wheel drive, and you could get the 5.7 or 3.5 in those. Those cars can be found at a discount for sure, but the history is always, you never know, you know, with those cars. Well, I've seen people take those cars and make them into, you know, really good looking performing cars. So sometimes a good shell is all you really need, and a police package car might be that option. Now just some fun little info. These cars are basically a mix of a Mercedes S-Class and E-Class. At the time, Chrysler was joined with Daimler, and that's how these cars came to be. So basically what it consists of is the rear suspension is basically from an E-Class, and then the front suspension, the transmission, electronics, the all-wheel drive system, the rear diff is all from an S-Class, and that Dodge took those and made these cars. But the roots of the whole thing is definitely Mercedes, which I guess is kind of cool if you think about it. It's like a mutt Mercedes. All right, now let's say that you found a car you like and you're gonna go look at it. What's the first things you're gonna look for? Well, first thing, walking up to the car, is rust. These cars are getting old. They're really bad about rusting in the rear quarters. More specifically, the rear dog legs where the quarter comes down by the back door. My car personally had it. I see a lot of them that way. The cavities back there are filled with foam, and I think what happens is water gets trapped in there and has nowhere to go because it's filled with foam, and then you get rust. So that's the first thing you want to look for. And don't be afraid to like try to peek under the side skirt, maybe see if rust is developing underneath there where it connects to the rear quarter. So that would be the first thing. Now the next thing you want to do is maybe look inside the car. If the car has leather seats, it's very likely that the driver's seat will be cracked and worn. It's just the age of the cars, you know, it happens. Another common thing is the dash above the radio bezel likes to lift, which is an easy fix with some glue, and you just clamp it down and it'll stick. Another common thing is the blend doors like to go out. Sometimes they'll just quit, or sometimes they'll click, but they're pretty easy to access from under the dash. It's not like you have to tear the whole dash apart to get to those. But other than that, interior wise, I mean, it's an early 2000s Dodge, so don't expect high quality. Expect hard plastic, expect the plastic to creak, expect the headliner to sag. Also watch out for clogged sunroof drains, which, you know, a lot of cars deal with that. So usually you can tell if the headliner's stained. Mine's stained. I gotta pull the headliner, and we'll be redoing that in all black and doing all the upper trim in black. So stay tuned for that one. It's gonna be a big project, and it'll totally change the inside of the car. All right, so you looked over the car, you like what you see, time to start it up. Now the majority of you guys will probably be looking at RTs with the 5.7. That's the most common charger that people gravitate to. So like I said, you got 06 to 8 cars with the pre-Eagle 5.7. So what's the common failure point? Well, if you haven't heard, if you're new to these cars, it's the valve seats dropping. So basically the issue here is when these heads were produced, the valve seat is steel and it goes into an aluminum head, and it's an interference fit, press fit. The tolerances were a little bit too big when these heads were produced. Now you could go the whole life of the car and not have this issue. Basically, the most common way that the valve seats drop in the pre-Eagle Hemis is they get hot. And obviously overheating any engine is bad, but even overheating these engines a little bit and then turning the car off, the coolant stops flowing and the temps in the heads can actually increase from radiant heat, just all the heat building up. And what happens is that tolerance between the valve seat and the head opens up. 9 times out of 10, what happens is somebody will shut the car off when it's hot. A few minutes later, go start it back up, and that's when the valve seat drops. You'll get noise, a misfire. Best case scenario is that valve seat hangs on the valve and doesn't drop into the cylinder, scratching up the cylinder walls and damaging the piston. In that case, it's as simple as pulling the head, either fixing the head or putting a new head on. If it drops down, messes up the cylinder wall or the piston, then you're in some trouble. So if you're getting a pre-Eagle Hemi, don't let it get hot. If you notice that temp gauge getting past the halfway point, you got an issue, turn it off, figure out what's going on before you drop the valve seat. All right, so what about the 09 and up 5.7s? Well, I'm sure everybody's heard about the lifter tick, Hemi tick, cams getting wiped out. That's where you get those. 5.7s seem to be the most common ones to do that. Now, this issue can affect any of the Hemis, to be honest. It's just 5.7s in particular because they put those in everything. The trucks, the SUVs, you know, the cars. 5.7 was in a lot of vehicles. So you hear about this more often with the 5.7s. So what happens? Now, a lot of people blame the MDS system. And they say that the fact that the 4 of the cylinders are dropping out, the lifters aren't getting oil or whatnot. That's not really what's generally agreed upon. The thought is the way the lifters sit in the Hemi engines is very horizontal, not vertical. So the fact that the lifters aren't very vertical, they say that there's an oiling lubrication issue. Basically, what will happen is the roller and the lifter will either lock up or lose the needle bearings out of it and slop around, and that in turn will start eating at the cam lobe, and eventually that space between the cam and lifter will grow and you start getting a tick, and then it'll turn into more of a loud tap, then it'll misfire, and by that time your cam's trashed. So 09 and up cars, or any of the Hemis, avoid long hot idle times. Sitting, idling at fully warmed up temps, you have the least amount of oil pressure in those scenarios, so you have the least amount of oil getting up to the heads, to the lifters. Now, Eagle Hemis, there's a simple upgrade you can do, Hellcat oil pump. I believe Melling has came out with a high volume pump for the pre-Eagle Hemis also. Those will increase your low RPM oil pressure and help with the issue. But as far as the Hemis go, that's basically your 2 issues, valve seats and cams. Don't let them idle, and don't overheat them. Simple as that. And if you want more information on 5.7s in particular, check out Reignited on YouTube. He's kind of taken a step back from YouTube, but he's got tons of videos on these engines and tons of info. He's a Chrysler tech, so he's been around them a long time. And if you really want to know the nitty gritty about these engines and cam swaps, head swaps, all that stuff, check him out. Now, if you do have an Eagle engine and you suffer the cam failure, just a little tip of advice. If you're just looking to get the car back on the road, drivable, maybe it's your daily driver or something, a lot of guys are going to be like, we'll buy an aftermarket cam. You know, spend $2,000 on a cam kit, but you don't have to, but you can upgrade. It's a good time to delete MDS if you don't want that. And then if you want a little bit of a performance bump, you can get a 6.4 manual trans cam, and that will go right into an Eagle 5.7. Work with your stock tune, no phasing, none of that. You don't have to change anything. It's advised to do the Mopar Performance valve springs, really only if you plan on raising the rev limit in the engine. The 6.4 cam will make power past what a 5.7 stock cam will. So just something to keep in mind. I did this swap in a 2012 Charger I had. Lifters went bad, replaced the cam, put a 6.4 non-MDS manual trans cam. The manual trans cams are a little bit better performance-wise than the auto trans cams. But you already have to buy a cam if you have a cam go bad. You already have to buy lifters. You already have to buy head gaskets. Why not just buy the 6.4 cam? instead of the 5.7 cam. Just an idea. I've done it. Car ran perfectly fine on stock tune. I then later had it tuned by Mario at MI Tuning just to get the best bang for the buck from the 6.4 cam. You will notice a top end increase for sure. All right, so you checked out the body, it looks good. You checked out the interior, it's decent. You've heard it run, it sounds good, no ticks, nothing, no leaks. Now you drive the car, what to listen for? It's front end suspension noise. That's gonna be the third major issue with these cars is they all seem to tend to develop suspension noise at some time. Now a little bit about the front suspension. There are 3 ball joints. That's not including the tie rod ends and the end links. You have an upper control arm with the ball joint, and then the bottom control arm is a divorced control arm. So that's 2 separate arms. Each one of those has a ball joint at the knuckle. So right there's 3 ball joints that can make noise. If they dry or get worn and they creak or knock. And then also sometimes the forward control arm, which is also called the tension arm, that's what keeps the control arms from moving back and forth. The inner bushing on those can get worn out, and then the arm can make some noise in there. Mevotech makes a really cool replacement arm for both those control arms. They have a solid spherical bushing on the inside. So you get all the movement that the control arm needs, but it's solid. Just a little upgrade. Now it might produce a slightly harsher ride just because there's no rubber bushing on the insides. But if you're looking for a performance upgrade, it's a cheap alternative. You also see on eBay the suspension dudes control arms where they have the big red polyurethane bushing on the inside. Now those arms work great for the rearward lower control arm, but the forward tension arms, not so great just because that big bushing will actually limit the movement of that arm when turning, because believe it or not, those arms do flex when you turn, and I found that under tight turns those arms will bind because of that big bushing. So if you want to run the suspension dude stuff with the big polyurethane bushing, you can do that in the main control arm. As far as the front control arms, the tension arms, either stick with an OEM style or the Mevotech arms. Now of course you got your other wearable items like the end links and tie rod ends. Those can make noise too, but it tends to be one of the control arms that make noise or a ball joint. Now other than that, those are the 3 major issues: your rust, your body rust, the engines, particularly the 5.7s, and then suspension noise. Those are your basic issues. You'll have other small things like the traction and ABS light coming on when you turn left with the turn signal. That's a common issue. I got a video on that. Also, where the transmission harness goes into the transmission, there's a plug adapter in there with O-rings. Those tend to leak. I have a video on replacing that. You got your random electrical issues. These cars are getting old. It's just part of the game. Exhaust manifold leaks where the rearmost stud breaks and causes a leak. More common on the trucks than the cars, but it happens. And sometimes guys confuse that with the lifter tick when it's really an exhaust manifold leak. Then you got water pump failures, leaks, which is, another one of those things. It happens with time. Buy a quality water pump. Some of those come with really crappy gaskets and it'll leak not long after. I had a situation where I put a brand new water pump on a 5.7 and everything's fine for a couple months, and then I would get a coolant leak when the car was cold. I could literally watch it seep out past the gasket, past the water pump housing, and drip down the front of the engine. When the car was warmed up, the leak went away. So basically, when the engine got hot, the gasket would finally seal. When the engine cooled down, the gasket lifted just enough for coolant to seep out. And it's just because it was a crappy gasket. So, high quality parts. And then also you got the shifter stuck in park, which is a common issue again. The mechanism that releases the shift lock breaks because it's plastic. You can get metal versions of those online and never have that issue again. Other than that, that's, just some normal stuff that you can expect from a 15 to 20-year-old car. Obviously, it depends on mileage, it depends on maintenance history, stuff like that. But overall, like I said, I've had 5 of these chargers, And I've never really had any catastrophic issues so far.
Knock on wood, knock on wood, knock on wood.
But there's your major things to worry about if you're shopping for one of these cars. Now, if you're getting one of these cars at just daily drive, maintenance, you know, just keep it on maintenance. Now, if you're getting one for modifying, here's just some info to keep in mind. First of all, if you plan on using lowering springs, these cars came with two different types of rear shocks. You have the normal gas filled shock, and then you have the self-leveling shocks. Basically, if you try to put lowering springs on the back with the self-leveling, the rear will not lower. So you'll have to switch those out for a normal shock. The difference is the normal shock, the bottom half of it is going to be the same diameter all the way down. A self-leveling shock will kind of look peg leg, where it narrows down to just a rod down to the lower mount. So if you just take a peek under the back, you can see what shocks you got. Also, the chassis is basically the same from 05 to 23, you know. There's a lot of swapping of parts that can be done. Both cradles can be swapped from current to 06 to 05. All the control arms will swap over. If you want the rear diff from a 15 or up, you need the cradle from a 15 and up. The 11 to 14 LSDs will fit in these cars. Obviously the Brembos will switch over through all models. If you're doing it on a non-SRT car, you need the knuckles, rotors, calipers. I've seen dash swaps, newer dashes in the old cars, seats, carpet, center consoles, all that stuff will fit. Door panels, not so much. The 06 to 10 stuff is very different from 11 and up, so those won't really swap. But if you want to put like a 23 Hellcat exhaust on your 06, you can do that. The only thing that changed through the years was hanger locations and how they mount, so that just takes some little tweaking. And then if you're trying to put an SRT exhaust on a RT, obviously it's not going to match with your mids, so that'll take some work. A Hellcat exhaust on a 6.1 car should bolt right up to the mids, no problem. Now let's say you want to put like 15 or 16 scat pack suspension on your 06 to 10 car. That goes right in the cars also. The only thing you need to be aware of is the 2011 and up cars, the rearward lower control arm where the shock bolts to, that bushing got wider for some reason. So the 11 and up front struts have a wider fork where it slides over the control arm. And if you try to put that on an 06 to 10 car, you'll have gaps between the bushing and the fork of the strut. Now, some guys put washers in there to make up that space. That's your call if you want to do that. The proper way would be, if you want newer suspension on your 06 to 10 car, just get the newer style control arms from a 2011 and up car. And then you won't have to deal with any kind of spacers or anything, and the strut will bolt right in. Now, obviously, you cannot use the newer adaptive suspension. There's just no harness or plugs or anything for that to work. Now, I have seen guys use a newer donor car that has active suspension, strip the 06 to 10 car, and put all the harness and stuff in the older cars. So essentially, you're putting the new car guts in the old car body, and you can make it work that way if you want. These cars are literally Legos. You just have to have the right pieces to put it together. And that goes for the Challengers too. It's the same chassis. It's just Challengers are like 4 inches shorter. The SRT8 I put Mopar Challenger exhaust on it. I just had to extend the midsection of the catback 4 inches, and it fit perfect. So that kind of stuff kind of helps when you're sourcing parts, especially if you're looking for used parts. A lot of stuff will translate back and forth between the years, so that's a really good thing for these cars, especially if you're trying to do maintenance or replace something, or engine parts and stuff that can be swapped over, like eagle heads on a pre-eagle engine. You can do that. You can put eagle heads, pistons and rods, manifold in a pre-eagle, and then you essentially have a eagle engine but no VVT. My car personally it's a stock pre-eagle engine, but I have 6.1 manifolds on it with 6.1 mids and a solo catback. So just something to keep in mind. Lots of people don't realize that they're all the same cars basically. But that's going to do it. Hopefully you guys learned some things, and if you're shopping for one of these cars, maybe this helped ease your mind a little bit and gave you some ideas of what to look for. Again, this covers the Chargers, the Magnums, 300s, and even applies to some Challengers also. So hope this helped. Appreciate you watching. Go check out my other videos. I got a lot of stuff on the 06 to 10 cars, like if you want to add paddle shifters to the steering wheel. But again, thanks for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.